Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Captain Marvel. This was a movie that turned out to be very, very different from my expectations, but more on that later. This video, I didn't speed up the footage quite as much as usual, but to keep it around the same length as the others, I edited out a lot of the mistakes and redundant things. But don't worry, there's still a lot in there. But I took some of them out for time. I'm trying this out as a way to help with some of the technical glitches that I've been running into, as well as to make the view a little bit smoother and clearer, get a better idea of what I'm actually doing. Always worth mentioning, I always block things out in a bright or contrasting color so I can see what I'm doing as I'm working. This prevents any unwanted textures or gaps that happen, and only show themselves as I adjust the colors later on. Then I can just go ahead and lock the transparency of the layers and go from there, changing the color to something more appropriate and adding shading to my heart's content. Almost all digital painting programs I've seen have a layers function, allowing you to draw on separate layers as you go. I'm not familiar enough with other programs to know if you can lock the transparency of those too, but I have found it to be an extremely helpful tool in the way that I work. It means that once I've blocked out all of the colors, the shading goes super quick and easy. I was also just testing out my webcam to capture the real-life footage of my natural habitat as I worked on this. There were a few lessons that I learned with that, like to get an extension cord for it so I could position the camera a little bit better and a little bit easier, and that's why the footage is shot from both sides. The cord wasn't really long enough to bring it to a place where you could see the inner part of my hand, where you could actually see what I was doing as I worked. It was a learning opportunity, and as I move forward, I'll play around with that a bit more. One thing that restricted me with that was my ability to move or rotate my screen as I worked. Usually it stays in the same place as I work, except for small spots where there's a line at a weird angle or a particularly long line that it would be easier to move my arm differently for. Now that I have a snazzy desk arm from a screen, which I am very grateful for, thank you, Santa, that is a luxury and better than moving my entire body for one weird line. It also works better than the rotate canvas tool, which sometimes makes the brushes go weird, but I tried it out here because I was filming with my webcam and I wanted to keep things in frame, so I just stuck with the rotate canvas tool, and I did not use it very often. I really like watching people actually work on real tangible things, like prop making or doll modifications, or the ladies that do the Copic marker or watercolor channels, things that focus more on traditional media. It reminds me that there's a person tied on the other end of the picture. Digital speed paints, you don't really get that. It's less personal. It was fun for me to record the real life part and to see that later. Maybe it's a weird thing to say that it reminded me that I really made this, but it's true. It's easy to forget with digital pieces how much work you put in because there's no physical end results. By the end, it just becomes this computerized piece, and I often feel disconnected from that, but maybe that's just me. I have also finally realized I never explained this mini-series I'm doing of Imagine Something Super. It started out with Wonder Woman, and as I discussed with that, it sparked my interest in doing fan art for movies, things just for the kick of it, and learning to just enjoy things in general. This is the second to last one in this series, and I'm only making 4 for now, but if you want to see more, let me know in the comments below what you'd like to see. Something that came along when I was doing Wonder Woman as well was a simple addition of glasses. Not as her alter ego or secret identity, but part of the hero's costume, including something very real life but perfectly imperfect to help ground it. On this one, Goose was just such a star, such a helpful character in the movie, especially when he got some snacks. I felt it was a good choice to make this imaginary Goose a helper as well. Whether this be a therapy cat, an emotional support cat, a trained service cat, or maybe one of those cats you can read to. The choice is yours, but one way or another, this is a helper cat for sure. After Wonder Woman, those imperfect additions also became more relevant to the movies themselves. So Spider-Man was all about how anyone could be the hero, and this one was about finding strength, even when you're told you're weak, and overcoming that. That was one benefit of watching the rest of the movies first, unlike what I did with Wonder Woman, watching the movie after drawing the piece. I could pick things that fit a little bit better. Something important to me with all of those is that they didn't take over the piece. They didn't become the focal point. They were just small parts, a detail, a personality trait. They're just who these kids are, and that's part of what makes them super, instead of being the defining aspect they have to live by. One thing I really wish I did better on this piece is the lighting. This hero's powers are photon blasts, which make her hands glow. She's got lots of other powers, but this one is the most unique to her. For the imaginary play aspect, I chose to show those battery-powered strand lights wrapped around the hands. It ended up being okay in the end, and I'm still pretty happy with the final results, but I think it could have been pushed so much further. Since then, I've been playing around with lighting, which you guys will see next week, and I almost feel like I've leveled up with that. But here, what was missing was contrast. Everything was too light. I needed a darker multiply layer or something so that the rest of her could be a bit more shadowed, leaving more room on the bright end of the spectrum, reserved solely for the hands and their glow. Another thing I struggled with was the hair. It's a thing I'm still getting better at and practicing, and I can see myself improve bit by bit. But perfection doesn't happen overnight, so I just gotta keep at it. The biggest issue here is that I didn't plan for that front bang hanging down, and it ended up feeling a bit disconnected from the rest of the hair, so I had to do that part a few times. That got edited down. The other part that got cut was my struggle with the cat mouth. I was originally trying to put a more human-shaped mouth there without realizing it. Something just a bit more simple than the final results. And that just didn't work. Once I finally realized and put a cute little W-shaped mouth instead, it worked so much better. So when it came to the movie, this was probably the one I was looking forward to the most. The internet had such great things to say about it, even though there were a lot of different opinions. The circles I run in were huge fans of Goose the cat, Carol Danvers' journey, learning her strength and all that, as well as the relationship between her and her friend Maria. So based on what I was hearing, I was expecting a lot more of Goose and Maria than what was actually in the film. Goose didn't even really show up until like a good 40 minutes in. And even after that, he's only got a few scenes where he really gets to shine like the true star he is. The dynamic with Maria is also a bit unexplored, and I was hoping for a bit more. I personally don't care what their relationship is defined as, I just wanted to see more of it. The one area that didn't disappoint was watching Brie Larson's character find her own strength. The bit where her enemy tells her that in order to prove she's really stronger, she'll fight without her powers, and she's just like, nope, and uses them anyway. But not out of anger, just because, as she puts it, she doesn't have anything to prove to them. That's such a different moment than what I'm used to seeing. I'm used to seeing that being the turning point where the hero really can win without their powers, or perhaps using their powers, but out of a great deal of anger, or something along those lines. But no, she doesn't buy into his nonsense, and that's lovely. I will also say another thing that surprised me, but shouldn't have, is that this is more along the lines of those CGI showcase movies where it's got a broad scope and lots of effects and nameless drones to fight off, laser guns and all that. I'm not saying that's bad, it's just not necessarily my jam. Still a great movie though. As this piece wraps up, I'm just adding tweaks to the background to give it a little shading and texture. I had laid that yellow in with plain shape and blunt edges, so I took my textured brush and softened that up a bit to fit in with the rest of the painting a bit better. One of my favorite parts is always the color overlay, where I paint the yellow to orange to pink to purple, and it just changes all of the colors of the piece to this beautiful, warm, nostalgic look. The border on this piece, I wanted to go for kind of a kid drew it with a crayon kind of look. Not sure how I feel about it, but I did learn how to tackle something like that and include some intentional textured gaps here and there, so that was fun. This piece was really great to work on, but I think my favorite one of this series is actually coming up next week. It's my favorite not because of the movie. That part wasn't my top pick. But it was where I finally got bold with the lighting choices. That just about does it for this week. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below and I will do my best to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time.